I'm the classic story. Amateur wrestler turned fighter. I started wrestling in 1998. That was the first year. The timing was good for me. I was a freshman in high school, and that was the first year that the UIL in Texas decided to, include wrestling into the sports program. Texas is football country, so wrestling was a brand new sport to us. It was very foreign to all the football coaches, and that's, as you mentioned earlier, that's where I met you, because we actually had to go against each other. You were the 160 pounder at Klein Oak. You were a senior. I was a freshman at Klein Forest, the 170 pounder, and we got matched up. And you were mentioning earlier, like, your recollection of that match was.
Yeah, I remember, because I had pulled off the win in the wrestling match, but you took my back, and at that point I had already done some jiu-jitsu, so I remember feeling like you, even though I won the match, it's like you beat me, because I was sort of in a jiu-jitsu mindset. You got the hooks in, you flattened me out, which would be the worst position you can be in a jiu-jitsu match. And I remember just sitting there, I was like, I can't believe this 14-year-old kid is like dominating me in a jiu-jitsu match. And luckily I had scored enough points before that, but that's what I remember from the match,
It's funny to get your recollection of the match, because you're saying, like, you're looking at it as like jiu-jitsu points, but I always remember it was actually, we were going back and forth, like we were scoring, you would score, I would score. It was actually a double-digit points of a match, and then in the third round I gassed out and you pinned me, and that was the first time you wrestled. The second time you wrestled is when you beat me on points, and you were the 60 pounder, I was the 70 pounder, and they had me matched up. Like, the guy I was wanting to wrestle was the South African national champion. His name was Cornell, and I remember thinking, like, oh my God, this guy's a national champion in my weight class. And for whatever reason, the coach would not match me with him to start off with, so he matched me with the 60 pounder. And the word that I got from them was like, well, this guy, he's actually, don't take him lightly. He's got some martial arts or some, judo background or something like that. So, like, to me, you were like the judo guy or something like that, and I always joke to say, hey, the only reason you beat me was because I was 14, you were 17, you were practically a grown man at that time. You had 3 years on me. It's the only reason why you beat me. But then my excuse for years later, whenever we did go against each other as men, I still use the excuse, you're still 3 years ahead of me, and even now when you tap me on the mat to say, you still got 3 years on me, so it's an unfair advantage.
Well, hopefully we'll still be trained together in our 60s, and if I beat you when I'm 67 and you're 64, then we can still use the same logic.
Yeah, I'll still be leaning on that. Yeah, he's got 3 years. So.
Well, I remember, and it wasn't long after our high school years that I saw, we met again. I saw you in local jiu-jitsu competitions, and then I'd heard that you were fighting, and it seemed like in a relatively short amount of time you had amassed quite a few amateur MMA matches, and then moved, from that point into the professional leagues, and from there you really took off. You fought in some big organizations. You fought some very worthy opponents, beat some really tough guys. When you made that transition, was this something that you thought about during your wrestling years? Like, I want to go in MMA, or was it just kind of, let me try this and see if I like it, and then you ended up
I ran into that transition when I was a senior, where it was like, well, the choice from here is either go to college and wrestle, or there's like really nothing else. And I still had that strong desire to compete, but I was fed up with school. It just wasn't for me at that point. I wasn't ready. So the next best thing I thought was mixed martial arts. At the time, it was, they called it no holds barred, no holds barred fighting.
NHB.
Yeah, and at the time, Tito Ortiz was the man on top. They were talking like the late 90s, and he was just dominating guys with just like a double leg takedown. And I was like, man, and his wrestling was just very, it wasn't like anything special from that perspective of just looking at it from a fan standpoint. I was like, if he's able to dominate the sport with just the limited wrestling that he has, I'm pretty confident I can have some good success in that. And so there was no easy access to the internet, just so you can just Google something and then find the gyms. You could still search things, but they weren't as sophisticated as it is now. So there's only like very few gyms. The only reason I ran into was able to train jiu-jitsu was I found a local advertisement for a local jiu-jitsu gym. It just happened to be just down the street. Yeah. And there wasn't, outside of that, I'm not even sure how many jiu-jitsu gyms were around back in the early 2000s. We're talking 2002 when I had graduated from high school. And so from that point, just started training just in the grappling by itself. And from there, that's whenever I decided to, I approached my career as far as mixed martial arts very much like how the boxers did back then, where boxers amassed like a huge amateur, career, several hundred fights under their belts. Then they try to go to the Olympics, and from the Olympics they try to launch their professional career based off of that. Well, at the time there was no amateur system when it comes to mixed martial arts fighting, and I think at the time it was illegal for them to even have amateur fights. And for a time that it was all pro. Like as soon as you were fighting, you were considered a pro. And also at the time too, it was illegal for closed fist fights. And anything that was less than an 8-ounce glove was considered illegal. So we had to do pancrase style, which is like open hand. Yeah, open hand.
Wow,
open hand fights. So finally, when I did decide I was able to fight after a couple of years of submission grappling under my belt, on top of the 4 years of wrestling, and then I was also striking for a couple of years, and I decided to look into some of the whatever I could find as far as competition. It was you had to really like search to get some competitions as far as a mixed style. And so one of the first cage fights I had was a pancrase fight, and that was in Saul Solis's Renegades Extreme Fighting, and that was back in 2004. I was 20 years old. I had several grappling matches under my belt. I had a lot of amateur wrestling matches, and they also had this other competition called the Dungle too, which it was mixed fighting, but you couldn't punch to the face.
I want to say they still have they had that up until a few years ago, but it's sort of underground, you don't hear about it as much, but I remember that too.
Yeah, and that was like an open mat, it wasn't a cage, you just fight on like an open mat, and that was just, you did whatever you could to get experience. But my actual first time stepping into a cage, it wasn't in the practice room. Now it's so easy for you to go to any gym can have a cage right now, but at the time, that was something that was very, very rare to see is a cage inside of a gym. And so my first time actually stepping into a cage was in the competition itself for Saul Solis's Renegades Extreme Fighting, and that was back in 2004 at 20 years old. Yeah. And from there had 5 or 6 amateur fights, won all of them, and decided to turn pro. And whenever I turned pro, won 10 straight and got a contract with the WEC. And so that was, and then at that point, that's whenever things started getting a little bit more rough for me. And then I had been in it for a couple of years, and I kind of started to veer more into the coaching side than the competitor side.
Right.
So
I remember those days very well, because, and I try to relate this story to students, is that when we started, the landscape of the grappling and the MMA arts was very sparse. You had to, like you said, you couldn't just go online and have your pick of schools and black belts to choose from to go train. I remember driving almost an hour one way to get my training in. There were a few schools in the entire area where we could get it, and it was just kind of like a handful of us that found something that we liked. And from you, it started with wrestling, and then you adapted that, for MMA. And over the years, we've seen how much it's grown, actually grown to the opportunity where there's a demand for it. There's a lot of students that want to learn it. And like you were just touching on a moment ago, it's kind of how you started getting the teaching. What has the transition been like from training and competing to teaching? Because they're two different worlds, and they don't always translate one to the other. Somebody can be a phenomenal athlete, but they're not able to give that passion, energy, and technical skill, pass it on to another student. And you've been teaching for several years. You run, you've taught kids, adults, multiple styles. What was that like in the beginning, and what have you kind of learned from that experience?
I think that we all have a misconception that if you're a very good competitor, then that's going to translate to where you're a good coach or a good teacher. And I think, like you and I can say from firsthand experience, that that's not the case. That teaching is a craft all on its own. Just because you're really good at jiu-jitsu doesn't necessarily mean that you can translate it well to teach somebody. And so it does take time to actually learn how to communicate, learn how to teach, learn how to put the lesson together. And the transition for me was pretty rough at first. I was a work in progress. I think like the average they say for a teacher to kind of come into their own is I was on an average of 4 years. And you can talk to any teacher and they'll tell you about like their first year or two of teaching, no matter what it is, whether it's a martial arts coach and teacher, or if it's just a regular teacher at school, they'll tell you, oh my God, I wish I can go back and talk to those first year students that I had and just apologize to them for just like how horrible I was. But yeah, I always made myself, as far as like my teaching style, I started off very disciplinarian as far as the way I'd like to teach, and made a lot of mistakes and took a lot of trial and error basically to finally come into my own. And that was back in my first time actually coaching and actually teaching people. It was at your school, was for kickboxing, and that's when I first ran into that, that finding those differences, that hey, just because I can do this pretty well, how am I going to communicate that? How am I going to harness this into a lesson to teach people? And not only that, but balance it out to where you have like different levels of people. And so that was a rough transition at the start, and then I think it took me to about 5 or 6 years to really feel comfortable to come into my own, to where I feel comfortable to where you can throw me some curveballs, you can throw me all sorts of diverse people, and I'll be able to find a way to communicate with them, to find a way to teach them.
Yeah, and I remember I went through something similar, and I remember when you started teaching, and I had been teaching a little bit, but even back then I was, much rustier than I am now, because there's a tendency to want your students to have the same excitement and passion and that you have, and the same work ethic. And I think as teachers we have to realize that not everybody's trying to compete, or not everybody's trying to be the best in the world. Some people initially are just trying to learn basic self-defense and get in shape, and now that can turn into something much bigger later on. Mm-hmm. But kind of recognizing the students' needs and being able to mold the training around that.
That's where it does become a little bit difficult, is to check your own bias, and that's the hard part, is trying to balance that and check yourself when it comes to your own personal biases. And I know, like, you can speak as far as, and I can speak from as a former competitor turned teacher. Yep. It's difficult when you first start to teach to recognize that and be sure and ensure that you're not just focusing on just the competitors or just the athletic people. And I'm sure we've made mistakes along throughout the years where you look back, you're like, oh man, some people that I just maybe left behind along the way. But it's an ongoing process. You're always trying to there's never like a pinnacle of, okay, well I'm at a spot where I'll never make a mistake again. Like, there's always that transition, there's always that evolution of a teacher. And so it's an interesting process, and that we all go through. And I'm comfortable with the spot that I'm in now. I've been teaching now since 2008, and those first couple of years were some rough years, but I really feel the last 5 I've came into my own as far as my teaching style.
Well, I agree, and it's the same with martial arts. There's no such thing as perfection. There's only continuous improvement. And you talked a little bit about going through that early on, and I went through the same thing. For me, it was all about trying to teach really awesome techniques, and I had less of a connection with the students' emotional needs, or paying attention to why they were there in the beginning. And over time, I've learned to improve on those shortcomings. But I would say for you, I mean, you've really come full circle, because from somebody who I would consider one of the toughest athletes I've ever had the opportunity to work with. I mean, not just your training regimen and your history and what you've gone through in the MMA world, but now growing into what you become as a martial arts teacher, where you're not just teaching classes, you're teaching brand new students, and you've taught brand new kids, and they've all excelled here at the school, and now teaching in the public school system. So it's kind of like you've not just embraced that, but you've made that your career, is teaching. So what kind of led you to that choice of career, in addition to your career as a martial arts teacher, but teaching in the public school system? I went through my 20s where I dedicated that to focusing on my dream to make it as far as I could in mixed martial arts. And after I started getting to a certain point, and then I tried to dabble into a little bit of managing the thought of possibly opening up my own school. So I managed another martial arts location for a while, and then came back to Team Tooke, which was part of my story. But and then I came to find from managing that place that the business side is not something that I just didn't have any desire to do. But I still love to teach. I love to coach. So I came back to you with that approach of like, hey, look, I primarily just want to be on the teaching side and be out of the managing part of it. And so I was able to stay into that. And so I'd been as a professional fighter at that point for about 9 years.
And I was getting in my early 30s, and I put myself on a cutoff where I was like, look, how far can I go into this? And, some windows were starting to close. I didn't have my education, and I didn't want to be 45 and sitting here thinking, being in the same spot where it's like, being paid as an instructor, can help you make some ends meet, but it's not something you can really retire on. I mean, you could try, but you'll be working for the rest of your life, and that's not where I want to be whenever I'm in my 60s, is just like not having any savings or anything else. So I started
challenging Ken Shamrock to a super fight.
So with that said, I started thinking of my future and just wanted to be, that's the thing that always kept me up at night, is just thinking of tomorrow. And I always prided myself as a fighter that I wasn't one of these bums that just like fight just because it's the cool thing to do. I always maintained a job or a part-time job while I was fighting. I was always able to hit my mark when it came to whatever I had to make to pay my bills for that month. And I say that because there's like a running joke. It says, what do you call a fighter without a girlfriend?
What?
Homeless. And so the reason, it's actually based off of like, what do you call a musician without a girlfriend?
Right.
Homeless. But the theory is the same thing. It's a starving artist. Someone that's making their way up. And we run into a lot of ego in the sport of fighting. You got a lot of entitled people when it comes to the sport of fighting and fighting in general. Boxing and mixed martial arts. And so there's a lot of guys that they're always looking for that handout. They're always looking for that free sponsorship. They're always looking for that or the sponsors to just to give them, kick money their way, and in return, like, there's really nothing that they can give in return other than just like, well, hey, I can offer you exposure, just by me being a fighter. I'll just throw you a couple of shout outs on social media. And I've never liked that. I always prided myself into being able to like give something back, or even just be able to take care of myself. But I couldn't maintain that lifestyle for the next 20 years, or I didn't want to. You could try, but it's not going to be a very fun life. Right. And so I decided, I was like, all right, make my next couple of runs, and we'll see how it goes. But if I don't get where I want to get by 31, then I'm going to go back to school. And actually, I was already in school at that point, but at that point, I went full time into school. I was going like a couple of classes a semester, but at that point, I made the decision that I wanted to go back to school full time and secure my future. And I kind of was looking at some of the majors to look in, and then teaching just kind of stumbled upon to that, where I was talking to my counselor, and she said if you get a special education certification, you can teach all the way to high school level. And with that came, I was like, oh, if I teach in the high school level, I can become a high school wrestling coach. And that's always been a far off dream too. And I thought that would never ever happen, because there was some point in my 20s where I thought I would never ever go back to school, and to ever be a wrestling coach you have to have a degree. And I thought I'm never ever going to go back to get my degrees. It's just too much time, too much effort. And but that all changed once I was in my early 30s. I said, just sacrifice these next couple of years, get your degree, set a future. So I chose to become a teacher, got certified in general education and special education, then finally settled in onto physical education. That seems to be more suitable to what we do. And it's been a really smooth transition. I'm never going to say as a first year public school teacher is never an easy process, but as far as what I been teaching in martial arts for the last 10 years, it definitely helped with my PE classes. And so that's basically where my transition came, as far as like going from a martial arts coach to an actual public school coach, was I just wanted to secure something for my future.
Well, I think you touch on a lot of really great points, especially, you're kind of speaking to that younger crowd that has aspirations of being a fighter. And I think it's a great dream to have, and you do have the GSPs, the Anderson Silvas and John Jones that make it and they become rich, but the reality is that it's a smaller percentage. And while there's more opportunity now than ever, one thing that you were saying that stuck out the most, I think, is you seem to be very disciplined throughout this process. Even when you were chasing the martial arts dream, you still had the foresight for what you're going to do. You had a game plan, an exit plan, and when you went back to school, you were still, you didn't miss any classes here. You were still here teaching. You were still making ends meet. And I think that's what a lot of people miss along the ride when they have a dream, that kind of aura, the feeling of like, oh, I'm in this MMA world. Or it could be anything. It could be the musician world, like the joke you made, is they forget about the element of discipline, which is always required in anything that you do. And so going back to school required you managing, your time and your commitments here and everything else. And And so I think that's the element. If you're going to be if you want to go after the fight path, you still have to be disciplined in your diet and your training regimen. And you talked about sponsors, like we see that, like, hey, who wants to sponsor me? I'll be a good fighter and I'll wear your T-shirt. It's like, well, what are you giving the sponsor? Like, what kind of relationship are you offering them? What kind of mutual reciprocation are you offering them? And that requires more than just saying, I'm going to go fight on this given day.
And if I could add to that, as far as if I could, whenever we have somebody that comes in and they say hey, I want to be a fighter, and that's always a red flag to myself, I know for sure, and I go out and let them speak for you too. Whenever somebody says well, I want to be a fighter, like I said, there comes with that a lot of baggage with our history of working with fighters. And so you can always tell the ones that are serious, the ones that are genuinely good people that look, man, I want to be a fighter, I want to do this seriously. And then you got the jokers that come around, you're just all right, you're just kind of catching on to just the hot trend that's going on. I'm just want to be a fighter. And then sometimes you got to look through that where people are saying, hey, I just want to train like a fighter.
Sure.
So you got to read through the lines quite often. But I do tell the people that are serious, I was like, well, look, first and foremost, always be able to pay your way, to take care of your people. You can only do that, well, I'll just give you a lot of exposure and shout outs through, social media. You can only do that so much. So I always try to tell, the fighters, hey, take care of your people, because you understand, they're missing time with their family. They're sacrificing time, from their classes when they're focused, solely on you. Those fight events, they're pretty fun, your first couple of years of being involved in this business. You went through it, I've been through it, as far as, man, this is, great. I can do this, every weekend, go to a fight event. It just makes you feel gives you, some purpose, and you feel like you're a part of something special. But then after about 5 years straight of just going to event after event after event, and then you're well, I've been to all these events, but hey, look at my bank account. How much have I gained from that bank account? I'm not saying everything should be solely on money, but at the very least, as a fighter, you could offer, your coaches, hey man, I have a fight coming up, and here's what I can offer you. Because we know you're broke, and we're not there for the money. We're there because we want to see you do well. But at least show some effort that well, here, I can cover you in a class or something, something that shows that look, I'm willing to give back to you. So I tell fighters, to be able to take care of yourselves, be able to give back to your coaches, and then and just always stay grounded when it comes into this game. You're never, there's no single person that's bigger than this sport. You're just, even if you're very successful, you're just the flavor of the moment.
Right.
They'll easily forget you. So your wins don't mean as much to everybody else as you think they do. When you're in that moment and you're winning, it's man, how can everybody not know about how good I am right now?
Well, we tend to see the world through our own lens, and we forget that people have their own lives and they're doing their own thing. And sometimes when we're successful or we win, that ego overrides the gratitude that we ought to have with the people that are helping us. And I know, me coming up both in jiu-jitsu and in the business, I've had a lot of mentors and a lot of help, and I wouldn't be where I am today without that. And I think that you bring you make a good point. The people that are there with you, they want to feel that they're appreciated, and that you're not just doing it because they're awesome, but you're there to really help them. And that's I think that's a very powerful point for up and coming fighters, especially when they're young and they go out and they get their first win, and they feel like the UFC champ, even though they just won a local amateur fight.
Yeah. And on top of that, because I was just saying about first take care of your people, but also don't quit your day job either. Don't. I think what really is attractive to younger guys as far as fighting is they think oh man, that'd be just so awesome. All I could do is just train all day and I could get paid every month to go fight, and it's not that simple. It's not. They end up. But that's the lifestyle they want. They think they can just live off of their fight purses, but you're not going to make that much money off of fight purses. You'd be lucky in your professional debut to make $500. I don't think I know anybody that made $1,000 unless they came from another sport, was a former Olympic champion that transitioned to a bigger show. But don't quit your day job. Be able to take care of yourself. Be a respectable man that can take care of their bills and take care of themselves. Don't be a freeloader at your gym. always try to like give back until you can network. I was fortunate to be able to network with a lot of different styles of, I had my guys that were really good at striking. I was able to network, and you end up kind of exchanging, favors. You help them out, you're helping them train for a fight, but at the same token you're getting that training in too. But you gotta establish those relationships first. But we've seen guys just come right off the bat, well, hey, I'm a fighter, so where's my special treatment?
Right.
And it just doesn't work that way. So just like anything else, just be grounded, and just first things first. Take care of yourself first. And then don't always be looking for that handout. So
well, on this kind of MMA world route, you've recently gotten into MMA judging, which is a very interesting subject to me, because it seems like there's so often there is controversy among matches. You hear people talking, oh, that guy got robbed, did you see that fight, that was nonsense, and I think people, that's just from the spectator's point of view, and to be behind the scenes, like you've gone through and become a certified MMA judge. So I'd love to hear your take on maybe some of the ignorance that the audience doesn't see. Like, what's it like to score an MMA match?
Well, where I started with, as far as like your question, like what's it like to score an MMA match, just like you probably heard it before, it's not as easy as it looks. But the reason why I decided to start into MMA judging was, I still wanted to stay involved in mixed martial arts in some capacity. So I'm not a competitor at the moment, but I still want, I love what's going on in the local area. We got Eric Garcia, who's one of our students, who's probably like the top promoter in this region of the southern United States as far as like big MMA shows are concerned, with the Fury Fighting Championship. And so I was doing commentating for his show, and I was sitting next to one of the judges, and after one of the amateur fights, the guy had won the match with like a rear naked choke, and the judge leaned over to me, and because it was during intermission there, and they were like, well, what do you call that move that person just won with? And they had kind of like a disclaimer, because they could kind of feel like, well, what am I asking here? Am I kind of giving myself up that I don't know that much? And they're like, well, I'm familiar with like the grappling moves, but I just don't know the names sometimes.
Sure.
And I was like, well, that's the rear naked choke, which even just as a casual fan, like that's a pretty common move.
Yeah.
Especially if you're in the position of to be judging people's fights and careers, you should know at least that name of that. So that got me interested, and so I started talking to some guys in the business, and I was just like, well, what does it take to be an MMA judge? And at first I thought, as far as Texas was concerned, was just you just fill out an application to the TDLR and just pay your fee, and then like you're a judge.
You're just a judge.
You might as well be. You might as well be with it, especially with that person, like what they said to me. And so I was asking, I was trying not to be too obvious, so I eventually led the conversation. So, well, so how did you get involved into judging? And they told me, well, a long time ago, I used to be married to somebody involved in boxing, and then they just kind of brought me along, and I just kind of fell into it from there. So
now I'm here.
Yeah, and so I was like, oh man, that is rough. So I was like, you know what, like let me at least see if I can get into that, because for one, I was interested, and then two, like what better person to have involved judging fights than somebody that has actually been in it for like their life, not just was just married to a fighter or something like that. So I came to find you have to get certified through an actual recognized judging organization, ABC recognized. Don't ask me what ABC stands for, but ABC recognized organization for judging. And they gave me the list. I talked to some of the guys, and the one that is pretty renowned is the John McCarthy School of Judging and Refereeing. And so those of you that don't know, John McCarthy, he was like one of the very first. He's a very pioneer of mixed martial arts in America. I think his first referee event was UFC 2 or 3, and then he's just a very prominent figure in mixed martial arts. And so I was like, that's pretty attractive. Of the schools I want to go to, I want to go to like one of the most well-known guys. And the person I was telling me about it said that that he has a high failure rate. And he said, just be careful. But he said, you should be all right, because you're involved in this business, so you know it's some of the things that they'll be talking about. And I didn't know what he meant by that, but whenever I did go to the actual school, I was surprised to see it was about 30 or so people, but there's a lot of fans that just decided that they just wanted to try to be judges. And I'm glad they had to go through that process, because it was a real big reality check for a lot of them. Many of them had never even been on the mats, but when we're going through that process of the John McCarthy school for judging and refereeing, they filter out, and they try to like weed out real quick. They like who who's familiar with the sport, who's been involved in the sport. And those are the guys that have like the highest chance of passing, because he does have a high failure rate. Not everybody is a very low percentage, and they take pride in that. As far as like like if we're only going to graduate just like the top people, and so it was a pretty cool process. They have it's a 3-part test. Like one test where they show you videos it's like a list of 100 moves. It's just like a blank sheet of paper, like 100 blanks, and like they just show you like 100 different moves on the screen. You got to be able to name each and every one of them. And then the second part's like a written exam, as far as like a multiple choice, asking you questions about like if fighter A does this, is in the mount for like 4 minutes, and then the time, and then fighter B does this, who would you score wins the fight. And then the third part, which is you can kind of BS your way through like the first and second one if you had never really been part of the business, but the third one was like you had to judge an actual fight, and you had to score the exact same way that John McCarthy did. And if you did like any discrepancies, like you automatic failed, no matter if you were doing like great in the exam. That was the most pressuring part, but it was a cool process. It was like 2 days. You're going through, judging fights, and then they would actually put you to test and be like, all right, like if you scored it for this person, I want you to stand on this side of the room, or if you scored it for this person, I want you to stand on this side of the room. And they make you explain and say, hey, Todd, how'd you score that fight? And you say, well, I think fighter A won. It's like, well, why? And they would just hammer you with questions and put you under that hot seat. And so it was a high pressure, atmosphere, as far as like they just wanted to like make sure like that they graduate just the best guys. But it was a good process that I think that not only should like potential judges do, but I think like fighters, it'd be very beneficial for fighters to actually take the course, especially if you fight in Nevada a lot, to be familiar, be a little bit more on the same page of of what you do, like what they're looking for exactly to win a round.
Well, I think it's important as a sport evolves, the professionalism and the expectations increase, as they should. Like we were talking about when we first started off, the jiu-jitsu tournaments were like they were in other martial arts schools, or they were like in back rooms. I mean, there were no organized facilities, and there was very little in terms of how to score that. But now it's evolved, and you have like the IBJJF and a proper judging and scoring system, and you even have to move up in the belts, you even have to go through that organization, through the process of learning the rules. And I think you make a very good point. Where does the sport, if you're an MMA, if you're a promoter, do you want to just have a sport that's just left to random judges that have their opinions, who got into it because they had a girlfriend who was into boxing, or do you want like somebody who's a professional who's been there? Mm-hmm. And I think that says a lot about the kind of the evolution of the sport, and how it's going to stand apart, the people that take the route of professionalism versus those that just kind of, want to do it an old school way. Mm-hmm. So. And
then I kind of took like the long route to answer your question, but you're saying like, well, what is it like to actually score? And an
MMA match.
Yeah, to score. Yeah, no, well, hey, maybe you can give me some tips on that. So. But anywho, Or not again. Then you fucked up the train of thought here.
Yeah. I did that on purpose. We're leaving that in too.
Okay, no, we're not. No, we're not. So okay. He said, well, of the 2 girls that I've known, this worked, Anywho, but with whenever you do finally score, the 3 criteria what they look for is duration, domination, and damage. The 3 Ds. And of those 3 Ds, the biggest D, the most important D of them is damage. And so it was cool to see that they had to score a couple of fights that I scored differently before I went to the training, as just like as a competitor, as a fan, than I did afterwards, to where I actually had some criteria to run by. And one of the fights was Robbie Lawler versus oh my goodness, the kid that's in PFL now. He was welterweight. McDonald.
Roy McDonald.
Yeah, Roy McDonald. So Robbie Lawler McDonald 2 was the one that I scored for McDonald prior to taking the course, and then afterwards I got to see like, okay, like I see what the damage, like what's the definition of damage. So one of the fights that I scored differently, other than for that I scored differently from before I took the John McCarthy training to afterwards, was Rory McDonald versus Robbie Lawler 2. And that particular fight, if you haven't seen that fight, you know, Rory McDonald had landed more volume of punches and he landed more shots, but Lawler had landed like the more damaging shots. And so it wasn't until after the training where I saw that, like, the difference in the scoring, and that, like, just looking at it from a different perspective and toward the training, where it's important to, you know, that's why I say it was important to be, like, as a competitor, it's important to know what the judges are looking for. And if you understand that, like, you know, that they're looking for that damage, you know, you can be, you know, thinking that you're ahead if you're, you know, Rory McDonald, you know, landing like all the shots, but then you get rocked by one big shot. You know, you landed like, you know, peppering 20 like peppering shots, and then all of a sudden you get rocked by one big shot. You know, like, how do you score that? You know, you have to be aware of what they're looking for. So that damage, and then duration, and then you know, the amount of control that you have. What was the 3 Ds I said? Damage, duration, and domination. Yeah, it's like how long you dominate. So you can be in that mount position for 30 seconds. Compare that to a guy like Khabib, who just, like, his duration of domination is, like, just so great.
It's almost most of the rounds sometimes.
Yeah, he scores a lot of 10-8 rounds.
Yeah.
And so it's important to have, like, all the judges on that same page. The thing that's kind of rough here is that Texas doesn't follow. They're still going by, like, the old set of rules. And so the training that I had gotten was from Nevada, which is going by now, like, the unified mixed martial arts rules.
Right.
But Texas is still going by the old set of rules.
Sure.
Which is not too much, you know, it's still somewhat on the same page. But I think we're, you know, judging is exactly what it's called. It's somebody's opinion. Yeah. And so, of course, you're going to have, like, different, you know, everyone's got an opinion, everyone's got, like, a different perspective of it. And I think it would just be helpful as far as, another thing that makes the judging difficult for the accuracy as far as judges are concerned is that, just like martial arts, the judging is a labor of love. It doesn't pay too great to where, like, the motivation to, like, always stay sharp with your level of expertise, you know, like, they're not going to pay you to go to a school to keep you fresh on your judging. Right. So, like, the only training I had was from that course from a year and a half ago, and even I get rusty at times. Even though I'm still involved in the sport. So you imagine a guy that just got his certification, you know, several years ago, that just doesn't really be involved in the sport very much other than the times he's judging, and you get his opinion. So you got just 3 different people judging a fight that from 3 different points of view, who may have gotten their certifications from a different place, and their requirements to pass the course was probably different. And then along with in Texas, you still have some old heads that were just grandfathered in from boxing that are still judging, and you know, they're doing the best that they can. So there's a lot of discrepancies, and as far as, like, the solution to that, you know, I don't have one off the top of my head other than just, you know, if there was some motivation to just have, like, a core of judges that would get together to try to make sure that they're still staying sharp, like, still continuing their education when it comes to scoring and to judging, because that's going to evolve too.
Right. So. Well, and it seems that you have to have the right minded person, somebody who wants to do it for the right reasons, because they're passionate about the sport and they want to give the most fair assessment of the outcome of the fight. Whereas, you know, if, like you said, if you just if it's not something, it's not a job that people are going to come up to you afterward and say, like, oh, you judged that perfectly, thank you so much. Mm-hmm. But if you get it wrong in their opinion, they're really going to be, like, kind of crapping all over you. And you hear that all the time. You hear, like, oh, what were those judges thinking? But you never hear, oh man, I'm so pleased with the judges and their professionalism. Yeah. So you've really got to be doing it for the right reasons, I think. And so, well, I think the battery's about to die, and I think we've covered a lot of topics, but man, it's been really great talking with you. I know we see each other every day, we talk all the time, but it's been great sitting down and sharing all this with you, and hopefully everyone watching, you guys got a lot of value from, you know, one of the OGs of Texas MMA. He's been around a long time, got a lot of wisdom, a lot to offer, and really appreciate it, man.
Thanks for having me, man.
All right, see you next time. Hey, thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed that, please be sure to like and subscribe to this channel. Also, don't forget to share this video with somebody else. Thank you.